Welcome to History of Music, where we're going to be taking a look at three composers, starting with Giuseppe Verdi. Giuseppe Verdi was a famous Italian composer of opera, born in October 10, 1813, in Ronco, Parma, Italy. He would be born to Carlo Giuseppe Verdi and Luigi Altini. I have no idea who the guys on the right. Verdi would be known for his works in opera that can be characterized as very powerful, with dynamic emotional experiences alongside it, and he would go on to die in January 27, 1901, in Milan, Italy. The young Giuseppe Verdi had a raw talent for music, and he would learn to play and later compose, getting his early training by one Antonio Barezzi, who would be the man to accompany Giuseppe Verdi in his training. He would teach him his ways and even allow him to marry his daughter, Margherita. Giuseppe Verdi would also later go on to study with a man named Vincenzo Lavina. He would find early success in 1839 with his first opera, Oberto Conte di San Bonifacio. In 1840, his wife would die, and in 1841 and in 1842, he would compose and perform his third opera, Nabucco. Let's go listen to some of his music. Giuseppe
La donna immobile, qual piuma al vento, muta d'argento, e di pensiero, sempre un amabile, leggiadro viso.
Giacomo Antonio Puccini was born to Michele Puccini and Albina Maggi on December 22, 1858, in Tuscany, Italy, and he would die on November 29, 1924. Giacomo Puccini's family had a rich musical history, and so of course he too was trained in music to follow the family tradition. However, tragedy would strike when his father would die when he was only 6 years old, leaving the young Giacomo Puccini orphaned. This would make it harder for him. He first studied locally and would soon go to the Milan Conservatory, where he would be taught by Antonio Bazzini and Amilcare Ponchielli, where he would create a piece called Capriccio Sinfonico. Later in his life, he would go on to marry a woman named Elvira Gamignani. She was already married, however, and this created a big scandal surrounding their more than questionable, we could say, union. It is also worth mentioning that this is also around the same time his second opera, titled Edgar, would release. In his later life, he would create even more works, such as the famous Madame Butterfly and La Boheme. These works would go on to become famous even to this day. Let's go take a listen to some of them, shall we?
Richard Wagner. He is born on May 22, 1813 on Leipzig, Germany, and died on February 13, 1883 on Calergi, Venice, Italy. He was a German composer, theater director, essayist, and conductor who is chiefly known for his operas. Unlike most opera composers, Wagner wrote both the libretto and the music for each of his stage works, initially establishing his reputation as a composer of works in the romantic vein of Carl Maria von Weber and Giacomo Meyerbeer. Wagner revolutionized opera through his concept of Gesamtkunstwerk, whereby he sought to synthesize the poetic visuals, music and dramatic arts with music subsidiary to drama. Early life. Richard Wagner was born on 22nd May 1813 in Leipzig, Germany, the ninth child, born to mother Johanna and father Karl, a clerk in the police service. Karl Wagner died 6 months after Richard's birth, and later the family lived with Karl's friend. Actor and playwright Ludwig Geyer, whom Richard almost certainly thought was his biological father, most likely influenced by their stepfather. Several of Wagner's elder sisters became opera singers or actresses, and Wagner himself often took part in Geyer's performances. Wagner was enrolled at Pastor Wald's School in Dresden, where he had some piano instruction. However, he was negligent and self-willed in his studies and struggled to play a proper scale with his teacher, commenting that he would torture the piano in the most abominable fashion. Later, after Geyer's death, Wagner was sent to Dresdner Kreuzchor, a boys' choir boarding school, where he became influenced by Gothic opera and began writing his own music and plays, with his first drama being heavily influenced by Shakespeare and Goethe. In 1828, Wagner first heard Beethoven's Seventh Symphony, and then shortly after Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. Before long, Beethoven had become a major influence on Wagner, with him going on to write a piano transcription of the Ninth Symphony. 3 years later, Wagner enrolled at Leipzig University, where despite living a wild student life, he dedicated himself to musical composition, studying the scores of the masters, in particular Beethoven. In 1832, his first symphony in C minor, was performed in Prague, and shortly after he composed his first opera, Die Finn. Later life. During his later years, Wagner spent much of his time in Italy for health reasons, and it was here where he worked on his final opera, Parsifal, where it took him 4 years to write. Heavily influenced by a newfound interest in Christianity, Wagner's last work remains controversial due to its treatment of Christianity, which was perceived by some as German nationalism. Despite being troubled by financial complications resulting in additional funding by King Ludwig, Wagner completed Parsifal in January 1882, and it premiered at the Second Bayreuth Festival in the following May. In February 1883, whilst living in Venice, Wagner died of a heart attack. A funerary gondola carried Wagner's remains over the Grand Canal, after which his body was taken to Germany for burial.
And that would end the tale of our three composers for today. I still have no idea who the guys at the top. Thank you for watching.